Bom dia.
Good morning. So we will initiate our second day of the IX Fórum 12. I would like to thank all of our sponsors, Google, Abranet, Oath, Cisco, TEDx Extreme, Seaborn, PS, Afinizar, NTT, GlobeNet, Facebook, Angola Cables, Ethne, UPX Technologies, Telsus, and L8. The first talk of today will be about the sustainability model of the IXBR. So we initiated our activities in June of 2017. I believe that the date here is wrong. And this year, we will recover our operational costs in São Paulo as we had expected. This is a recognition of people that accepted this process, therefore, that we are totally aligned in this term. And what we're going to start doing next year is a recovery process of the operational cost of Rio de Janeiro. This is something that we addressed from the beginning. We said we were going to do it. And the idea is that until the end of the year, the first week of January, we will know what the value of the ports in Rio are. We still don't know if the cost will be the same as in São Paulo, but we will know this then. And the idea here, we prepared a timeline. By and large, what do? We calculate the used funds during the last day of the month. So we're going to see the funds that were used in Rio on December 31st. And the process will be like if it would be a normal invoicing process. So here we're going to include this in the system. We will enter actually the costs or the funds that were used. And here we have two situations. We have ASNs that are connected in Rio and São Paulo. The ones that are in São Paulo have already complied with the contract. They're already following the payment process. This is a very simple process. And there are ASNs that are only in Rio, and they will have to comply with the contract in the future. So here we will notify all the ASs of Rio regarding the process. The idea of these fees will be charged as of the 1st of March. We will calculate at the end of March the first bill. And this bill will be sent on April 5th, and then it will have to be paid on April 15th. This is the deadline for payment. Here we have a timeline of all of these steps that are available here. You will receive a notification, and for those that need a contract and for those that cannot accept the contract online, well, there are companies that work with payment processes, and they ask us for a formal copy that is already signed. The only thing you have to do is to request this through this email, pagamento@ix.br. Here I would just like to show you something that I wanted to point out. These are calls for support. These are payment calls. So here you have the number of calls that are opened and closed every month. And this is correspondent to the month of August. There was a great amount of calls that were opened. And precisely, this is a dunning process or a request to normalize the payments and also pending payments when we see cost recovery. So people from NOC that help us throughout this process are taking care of these calls. So it is very important to analyze this and see this and regulate your payments. Another thing, we generally receive contacts from our participants through email. And what happens? Sometimes they request information, payment slip, or some type of correction, or showing us the payment slip already paid. So when you send these emails to us, please be careful and tell us the number of the autonomous system you're referring to, because many times for us, it is a bit difficult to locate DAS, because not necessarily the enterprise that is sending us the email is the same enterprise. So it's difficult sometimes to discover the AS. There are certain situations where we really don't know, and we have to wait for a person to call us or to be able to know what company we're talking about here. And another thing would be, every time you see your bills, your payments, and you have all your funds listed or resources listed, it's important. If there is something wrong or if there is an inconsistency, call our support in the billing page and do this before we generate the paying slip, because once we generate the invoice, for instance, there are a number of consequences, because the invoice is like a tax document for us. So yes, if there is a problem, well, we can resolve it, we can correct it, but don't wait until you receive the invoice, especially when you wait one more month, because we have already collected the taxes and the process is much more complex. So this was a very brief presentation, and this is a feedback just to show you that everything is on the right track. We will start this process in April, and if you have any questions, we're at your disposal. So if everything is fine, we have Arno Niep from D6, and he's participating today of the forum. And as we have 10 minutes available, I would like to invite Arno to talk about PeringDB. He is responsible for the project, and it's a pleasure to have him here.
Bom dia. Good morning. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, I'm Arnold Nipper. I'm from DKIX, and I'm also from PeringDB, and I just had my 10th anniversary with PeringDB. I'm not the founder of PeringDB, but I'm with PeringDB for a long time already. So what is PeringDB? So PeringDB basically is a database where you find all the information you need for peering or for interconnection. And what are these basic information you need? Of course, first of all, you need information about the networks, then the information about collocation, and last but not least, information about Internet exchange points. And this is what PeringDB has all in one place and nicely stitched together. That means information about all of the networks, all of the collocation, and all of the Internet exchange points. So if you have one of these, if you're either a network operator or a collocation operator or run an Internet exchange point, you are heartily invited to have your record in PeringDB and also to have your record updated regularly. So why do you need it? As a network, for sure, you know the internet is not only one net, the internet consists of thousands, of hundreds of thousands of networks. So you definitely are not able to span the whole world, you have to interconnect. And that means you have to peer, you have to interconnect with someone. And in the easiest case, if you are a smaller network, you at least have to have upstream. You have your own ASN, and then you at least have to have 2 upstreams. And that already qualifies for being in PeeringDB. So every network which has an ASN should register in PeeringDB. And register, have your contact information, so if there is any problems with your network, if someone would like to contact you, it's easy to find your information. And next, what you also should do if you have a network is to indicate in which collocations you are. In most cases, your interconnection to other networks are not bidirectional rings, but what you do is you have points of presence in collocation centers, and that is where you meet other networks, either for upstream, for interconnection, for selling, for whatever. So if you are in a facility, just indicate that you are in the facility. That also helps you to promote or to get more visibility, and this also helps others to find you. Maybe there is another network around who looks for interconnection to one of your customers, and you don't know about it. So what this network perhaps will do is to go to PeeringDB and see where you are located and where the nearest point is where to get you. And last but not least, of course, what you also should do if you are peering at an internet exchange, just indicate that you are at the internet exchange. And for an internet exchange record, what you also have to do is to put in your IP address, sys, the V4 and V6 addresses, the port speed, and whether you are peering with a route server or not. And of course, as with all the other information, please keep them up to date. So if you did not yet register with PeeringDB, just go to peeringdb.com. It's easy to register. Typically, registration will be worked on within 6 hours, at least in 24 hours. We have a support department behind it. And PeeringDB, meanwhile, since, I guess, 4 years, is also an association. That means you may become a member. It's quite easy to become a member. There are only 2 requirements. First is to have a PeeringDB account. As I said, that's very easy. And the second one is also very easy. You only have to subscribe to the PeeringDB governance list. There is where we talk about the governance of PeeringDB. As soon as you did both, you qualify for being a member. To have a say in the annual membership meetings and to vote on who is on the PeeringDB board. So financially, PeeringDB does not cost anything for the users, so it's free of use for you. That also encourages you to register with PeeringDB, the use of PeeringDB, both passive as well as active, that meaning having a record over there does not cost you anything. So but still, there are costs incurred with PeeringDB, and how do we recover that? So we are fully 100% relying on sponsorship. We have a sponsorship level model starting from $2,500 US dollars per year up to $25,000 per year. And we are well funded. We strive to have a deposit of 2 years to be able to not only run PeeringDB this year, but also next year and the next year after that. And we are, meanwhile, financially sound. And this is really due to the sponsorship. And why do networks sponsor us? What PeeringDB offers is one hand side is a graphical user interface, which makes it easy for users to look up in the information, but which is also crucial is that it has a really powerful API. And this API helps to automate all the peering connection setup and management. And this is what bigger networks like. They like automation. They like to be able to look up information. And this is really the most important, perhaps, for all of the networks to have a PeeringDB record, because the bigger networks tend to say, we are only peering with you if you have a PeeringDB record. And as said, having a PeeringDB record and keeping it up to date is quite easy. And that's it for the moment from the top of my heart. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask one. Or if you have any remarks, please also do so. Thank you. Obrigado.
Muito obrigado, Arnoldo. Dando continuidade, eu gostaria de convidar o José Antônio Garcia, que vai fazer uma apresentação.
Garcia to talk about media production in IP.
Ok, bom dia. Meu nome é José.
I'm José Antônia. I work in the TV arena. I've been working a long time with TV production. And in my area, there is a movement that converges toward networks, IP networks. Not in the distribution area that has existed for a long period of time. I'm not talking about media distribution from the web, but here within the studio, within production, live production of TV. I participate of the Brazilian Society of Engineering, and we created like 2 years ago a study group to see this new movement that we're observing in the world, that is the production movement. So this movement has gained momentum, or it gained momentum when high resolution like 4K, 8K started emerging. The equipment within the studio from black and white, analog, digital era, standard resolution, then after in HD TV, these equipments were always connected to coaxial cables for video, audio cables. We're talking about a specific cables for this type of connection. Now, when the first 4K camera emerged that has a resolution and a beat rate four times higher, it was necessary to evolve here because the first cameras, as they had 4 times more resolution, they needed 4 coaxial connections. And all of this within a production environment, within a studio with hundreds or thousands of interconnected pieces of equipment, this would be impossible to carry out. Now, in the case of the 4K, that has rates 4 times higher, so it's like 6 gigabits to capture 30 frames or 12 gigabits per second in a capture of 60 frames per second. It was developed. There are channels that have boards with SDI connections. We still have this type of connection in 12 giga, but working with coaxial cables at distances that are not very long. Here we have distance limitations and unidirectional signals is still a problem within production. Here we have the rates that are used today for HD, HDTV, 1080p. That is what we see in the open TV. Or cable TV, the rate is 1.8 gigabits per second if it's 30 frames. And in the case of 4K resolution, where we already have production and displays of 4K TVs in some countries of the world, they already have open broadcast at 4K. The rates would be around for production, 12 gigabytes or 24 gigas, and 8K. We already have networks broadcasting 8K. That would be like Japan, that was already in a race to broadcast 8K until the Olympics. These rates are even higher. But although we have all these SDIs at 12 gigas, we cannot jump out of the race because we would need hundreds of videos for one connection, fiber connection. And why IP within the production? Because it gives us a dynamic workflow. We will talk about this later on. As you only have one connection, it is very easy to share the resources, to broadcast remotely. And also IP, because with format you can go to HD TV, you can evolve to 4K, 8K. It's an agnostic format and it's not blocked as it is today in SDI. Of course, we have a reduction of cables, a reduction of weight. When you think about a mobile unit that is like the cart to carry out major events, like carnival, football, you diminish the amount of infrastructure that is needed inside one of these vehicles. And this is also important in the studio. And in addition to this, you are also part of the IT world with all the innovations at the scale of the IT market. How is an interconnection inside a studio today? Here you have a number of sources or transmitters of image. Here you have cameras, microphone, you have the control tables, the special effects, you have visualization, and everything in the SDI world would use coaxial cable, audio cables, synchrony cables. Every source should start with the same pixel, the same point, the same line, so that we can work in unison to have special effects amongst the different sources. And everything in the SDI world is interconnected through an SDI matrix that would be cross points, and are in charge of the interconnection between the source and the destination. So basically, this is the type of installation that we have in the SDI world. What we intend to do here is to have an interconnection with less cables, or only cables and fibers, using Ethernet amongst all the transmitters and receptors of the network, this using an internal screen. Most of the networks that are using, or TV networks that are using these type of installations, carry out this type of network. It is a simplified network, and they use two networks here. Everything that is in one network is totally is copied to another network. The idea here is not to increase the traffic velocity, but yes, to have the redundancy of this traffic. You will have independent networks and one can stop. You can work with one network, update it, while the other one is still working, because it would be very difficult to have a live schedule. You cannot stop your network for 10 minutes. So what we do here is each source has two outputs, and we use a protocol to use 2022 translucent, and the receiver can receive these two signals and switch when there is a drop. But the idea here is to have a non-drop network. As I already mentioned, the space gain that we have when we install this is something very significant. And here we have a comparison between one installation with SDI, and here on the other hand we have another installation with only 10 units. Another characteristic that allows us to work with IP is the flexibility, because here you can distribute resources or you can optimize. Remote production is using by TV networks that use IP. Why? Because with this, you will only have one data center where most of the equipment are placed. This is control, effect, graphics. And at remote distances, you can capture the images, therefore you distribute your team. The team that captures the image can be located in different places, or they can be traveling in different cities. For instance, in a worldwide championship or a national championship, this is used a lot in Australia. The capturing team goes to the stadiums and cities, and they're connected to a central station where the transmission or the broadcast is controlled. Here, resource sharing is very important and interesting with these type of installations or facilities. Now, the main objective of TV, or for people with TV, what we intend to do is to have greater virtualization of the equipment, greater virtualization of the functions that are used, because everything today is specific to be used in broadcast, now to use it within the studio. So with IP, in addition to having flexibility, you can go toward the transformation of this hardware in software, and you can have virtual environments, and you will be able to work with services or on the cloud, service on demand, and therefore the system will be more efficient. For you to have an idea, most of the TV networks have this problem. The installation is for the peak of production. I will give you an example that I see. Fox is installed to broadcast the NFL, American football, that takes place on Sundays and throughout the year. Now here in this event, they have 100% of the usage of all of their equipment. This is on Sunday. Now on Monday, this usage drops significantly. So therefore, a great part of your equipment are idle. I believe like 30% of usage during the week. So this is not efficient. The idea to virtualize and to work with services is very important. And now for this to happen,
it is necessary that we comply with standards for media connections. There are some standards dating back from 2008. This is the SDI, actually. That is a serial digital interface to television usage. They use coaxial cables. To the IP world, there are some standards. The 2022 is highly used, but not efficient because it maps the FDI and they repackage that in FDA. You have audio and video, everything packed within the IP address. That is not always enough. You just want to send an audio and you have to remove the video or to send the video throughout to that sound speaker. Sony has its own standard where audio and video are packaged with different headers, and they are just a flow to different types of media. There is another manufacturer who's got a format similar to PEG-TS and PEG-TS. Different formats which may hinder you deploying an installation with so many manufacturers. So be careful if they do not comply with the same standards. That will not be possible. ING's Alliance for IP Media Solutions. Such an alliance try to standardize some of those patterns where several providers, several manufacturers, they got together to develop a format that could be used by everyone, from left to right, all those previous existing standards that could hinder the IP evolution. And on the right, we have the SPTA 2110. That is the chosen standard to become a standard by all manufacturers in all installations. Most of them are UDP, RTP standards, independent sizes, and multicast in the studio. This is the 2021-10 standard where we have a flow for video, another one for audio, actually several flows for audios. They are all isolated with their IPs and data flow. And in the video, there is a rate reduction where the only part where there is video is broadcasted. Video at the SDI has some intervals that were reduced with this new standard, the mutual standard. There is an international exhibition fair, IBC, where the lower flows, 95% of our standards, they have already been published by the SMPT Society. That is a society which encompasses television and cinema. We have here, let's say that I want to remove a Sony camera and replace it by a Panasonic one. You can do that and without any interruption. It has to be just plug and play as it should be. And some other standards for cloud use and virtualization. That is ongoing. We still haven't got a final date, but that is our ultimately goal. All Ethernet RTP standards are used as part of the status. Any other layers were developed exclusively for TV use. So the precision time protocol was published. Media is 2110. Media description with the descriptive articles. And as to the network, the registry and equipment occupation, they all have to comply with the IS-04 to provide connection between a source and a destination. IS-05 is the standard. And as far as network control, we have definite networks by software. All those ISs, they are APIs of standardization. We have also to standardize that Italia, when the camera goes to the side, there is a red light on. Today, we use a pair of cables to carry out this signaling. 2110 is almost 100% published. /10 worries about synchronization with the 2059 /20. Here we are talking about no compression video, where those rates of 6 or 12 gigas, there is no compression so far. And usually within a studio, we do not use compression. /21 deals with the shape, the pace, the rhythm of the beats, classifying different equipments between those which are narrow or those which are broader, and the beat paces will follow that, and they are classified as being wider or narrow equipments type. All standards are respected sometimes, and they do not work because there are some bursts or because they are generated by a software, and the equipment that is receiving, if in that case that is a narrow one, it will not be able to get it as some buffers have to be conducted. Then we have subtitles, time codes, several other aspects which have to do with video production, and we cannot deny them. /8 is an integration of the previous one, 2110, and the last one, which has not been published yet, that is a support for compressed audio and video. That is a light, a mild compression, 3 to 4 times low latency, to be able to be performed within the studio setting. There are several other standards that are being studied for further recommendation. As to synchrony and timing, we work with synchrony generators which exchange messages to all other equipments in the network, where all equipments can be synchronized with a difference of microseconds between one and another. When you turn on the equipment, there is a great chance to be out of time in relation to the master time. 4 messages are exchanged with receptors. Receptors will keep those sync messages, and after some time, they can know the shift in relation to the master. And in addition to the shift which is corrected, still they have to comply with a network delay which has to be calculated. And after the 4th message, you may synchronize that. All these messages by default, they take up to 5 seconds after the synchrony, and then there is a precision of accuracy of microseconds. We have to have cameras or image sources that are connected at the network, which produces the multicast flow. They have to be acknowledged by the broadcast controller, which is the connection controller available in a broadcaster. And with that, you have a connection, and the media is broadcasted from the source to the receptor. That can easily happen when you try to have different suppliers, different vendors. And if there is no standardization, the source cannot register in the network, and the network will not be aware about the existence of that equipment, and connection will not happen. But if you have some sort of standardization, service provider, when you connect a camera, they register, well, hello, I'm a camera, I have a video flow, one of audio or two videos, I need a return. They register, and from them on, they can, throughout a different API interface, to conduct the connection with that source, acting the multicast of that source, and even with different vendors, they can make receptors being able to connect to the proper flow. And with that, there is interoperability among several vendors. You can have a band control that allows a very interesting control to your network using those protocols such as metconf or openflow or any other specific protocol or of any other manufacturer, where you can have a great control accuracy of the network. That's interesting for security. No other bit will transit into the network if that is not authorized. Similarly, we have a register provider, and throughout an API interface with a SDN controller, the broadcaster of the equipment, they can establish those desired connections, where they establish what will be the connection from point A to point B. They establish the connection like that. Can we work with 21 then without those interfaces? And some of the broadcasters, they use that, and they are committed to develop specific drivers to each equipment. There are several equipments from different manufacturers where you have to control the communication drivers with each one of the equipments, identifying each required driver. That is part of the installation process, and there is a risk of manufacturer invalidate the driver. That's possible. Those of you that could not wait and installed it not according to the recommendations, you are working but with some restricted conditions. That's very worksome. There is sound. That's a quite didactic video. Well, I'm so sorry. That was a demo, a graph of a remote production. That was a graph showing a remote production. You have the studio can be 100 meters or 100,000 meters, doesn't matter, allowing remote production. That was a theater with a remote production where the team goes to the gig, to the event, they travel, and the team which is within the studio can be shared after that event to another one. That is the idea of remote production. That's it for now. Thank you. Questions? The idea with this presentation was exactly to go out of the box, allowing you to make some considerations. It's low latency, high velocity, the little jitter. Some tests, they started to be done for remote production, and that will be a trend. I guess the broadcasters, they will start using this type of connections for distant connections. Several companies are working with that, especially sport broadcasters. They are working a lot with that configuration of remote connection. Okay, thank you.
Bom, dando continuidade à nossa programação.
Next, we will start now a panel addressing remote peering. The idea is to divide this panel in two parts. The first one before the coffee break and the second one right after the coffee break. Here we have representatives of the three main principles internet exchange in the world. I'd like to invite Arnold from D6, Ben Hedges representing Links from London, and Eric Verhoef from MDisk in Amsterdam. In this first part, I asked them to talk a little bit about their experiences, their models of remote peering, what is their understanding about remote peering. There are different interpretations as how could that happen. And there are different models in each place. Right after this first part, we'll have a coffee break, And right after the coffee break, we will invite two subsea carriers who offer connectivity for remote peering, and two SPs which currently have connections to those foreigner IX. So they will join us right after a coffee break, and they will share what the advantages are and what they are being able to reach with this type of subsea connection. Let us start by Arnold. Can we start, Arnold? Can you be the first, please?
It's okay. So yes, what is remote peering? So when the internet exchanges arose, that was around in the early 90s, most of the connections to the internet exchange also placed their router at the facility. And in most cases, it's also it was a requirement that the peers had to put the router over there. So if you look at today at the research papers, what is termed remote peering, then remote peering are those connections where the participants are not in the IXP facilities and or they come via the so-called resellers. Resellers are partners of the internet exchanges which connect with a big pipe into the IX fabric and then resell smaller chunks of this connections. So this is nowadays, I would say, the well-defined, or it's not really well-defined, but this is what it's called, a remote connection if it's not within the IXP facility or if it comes via the reseller. Still, it's hard to detect when it's a remote connection, and there are a lot of debates whether remote peering is good or bad, because there are disadvantages and there are great advantages for remote peering, and perhaps Ben is able to tell more about that.
Thanks, Arnold. Maybe use the technical guy and means the commercial guy can be on the different sides of the coin of this one. So remote peering, for me, I really don't like the actual term because peering is peering. All we're talking about is how you're connecting to the IX. And as Arnold said, for almost since as long as the exchanges have been around, this has existed. It's only because more networks have got involved in peering that remote peering has really come around, because you're just not in the same facility. But that doesn't mean you have to be thousands of kilometers away. You can just be in the next facility to be termed remote. And as we've seen technology move forward, the question then is, okay, what really does determine a remote connection? Is it something that is just connected over fiber, or is it a cross-connect inside a data center? As we go to much more optical-based networks, does that still count as remote peering, or does that count as a connected peering? As a lot of the exchanges move to completely optical solutions, particularly as they go to expand the locations that they're in. So those locations maybe don't have a full switch in them, but they're touted as being the IXPs in this facility, but actually there's no switching going on in that facility. Do you count that as remote peering? For us, if we were to literally draw a line down the middle, we say yes, that's remote. If it's not actually on the switch in the building, then we count it as remote. But it doesn't make any difference to the quality. In fact, in a lot of instances, it's much better for people, as Arnold said. In fact, we find that we get more remote peers from outside of the UK. That's where the majority of our remote peers come from, particularly people that are long hauling if they're coming, say, from Asia or Africa, South America, where, as we saw yesterday in the telegeography presentation, the cost to actually reach there is expensive. But it's still cheaper sometimes than doing the intercontinent or intercountry transit. So we see a lot of remote peering from Africa in London, for example, because it's cheaper for them to come up to London and do their BGP in London than to go and do that in Africa. We actually hope, as a non-profit that we really work for the good of the internet, we hope we see that change. And we are seeing that change as the African IXPs start to build up their own networks more, as the OTTs start to go into those countries where they previously haven't been, the peering starting to move back more locally. And that's really what it should be. That's how all three of our IXs, although we are massive international peering points now, we started off with the intention to keep traffic local. That's not really what we do now, but there is a role for that and a role for remote peering for sure.
Yeah, I agree with Ben, and I think especially for the Amsterdam Internet Exchange, remote peering is a huge deal. If you look at new customers connecting to the Amsterdam Internet Exchange, then in the last 3 to 4 years, almost 60 up to 70% of these new customers are not connecting directly in Amsterdam, but they come through the partner program, so they're connecting remotely with transport. And we see that these connections are in the beginning, they were mostly from neighboring data centers, not that far away. They came from Frankfurt, they came from London. But nowadays we see that remote peering, they come from all over Asia, they come from the US, they come from Russia. We even see a lot of networks from Brazil connecting to M6 now, and they use remote peering in order to get the connectivity. So that's really interesting to see. Like this year, we now have 10, 11 customers from Brazil that are on the M6 platform via remote peering. So it's really a big deal for us, and we see it keeps on growing as well, and different models that we use. But I don't know. I'm also interested to learn about how you guys are dealing with that.
If I could just come in on one point, and then I'd like to know your. So you said a statistic then that the majority, so around 70% of your new participants now are coming remote. We see completely different. We have about a third. So still a decent proportion of our participants are coming remote, but it is only about a third. So I'd be interested to know how that looks in DKIX.
So just to come back, so nowadays it's also accepted that everything which is more than 10 milliseconds away, measured in round trip time, would be termed remote peering. This is a easy, perhaps, level you can show. And what you say also, the latest research paper, which also was presented at the EPF, it also says that 2.5 times more connections come from remote than from local nowadays, all over the axis they look at. That would also match your figures, perhaps not yours. But if we look at, so I guess it's also, I do not have the exact figures for DKIX, but I guess what we have a saturated market when it comes to networks from Germany and from Europe, and where we are now tapping into is in networks from non-European networks, networks which are far away, and this would also mean that I guess most of the networks which now connect to DKIX are remote peerings. So why is it still interesting to know? You say peering is peering, interconnection is interconnection. That's definitely true. But we also have to look at the types of the networks or participants which are connected to an IX. We have the CDNs, the content delivery networks. We have networks which peer at a lot of internet exchanges. And those networks are definitely interested in to know where the other networks come from. And what we as an IX can do is to tell those participants whether this is a local connection or this is a remote connection. And I guess an IXP should do everything to help their participants to make their choices optimal. And this also means that we should do everything to give them figures about how far away networks are, whether they are remote, whether they are local, whether this is a stable connection or not so stable connection, and so on and so on. Because the more information we give to our participants, the better they can make their choices for their routing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that in general as a principle. Certainly, things are so different now to they were 20 years ago because the buyers and sellers, and although obviously peering is a free multilateral, bilateral arrangement, the data that you have helps you make those decisions better. And that may even be whether you're going to decide to pop a location or not. We allow members to find out their own data about how people, where they're connecting in, and share if they wish to. As a membership organization, our MOU essentially acts as an NDA between us and our members. And so we don't release any of their own network details to other members unless that they wish us to do so. But it's easy to find out. We've got a very active mailing list, have a very active work going through. But to come maybe more to some of the things I think you were looking for this is to also talk about the reseller channel rather than just the remote peering. Because we've all had people coming in remote for decades. But in 2011, AMSIX were first out with the reseller program, and then Links and DKIX followed within 3 months. We'd all been talking in kind of like the IX forums that this was definitely a demand. We were all having the same demand from some of the reseller community about we want to find a better way to bring people in. We're bringing people in, we're long-lining them in. What we really want is to just drop them onto a single port and then bring these VLANs. And that's changed a little bit about how IXPs have been resold. It made it much more commercial. Suddenly you find, and we've never really been in an environment where we sold against each other. And we never really still do because we know that as a peering community, as an environment, we need each other. The networks need each other because you're not going to get complete coverage in any one place. But for the resellers, it's different. Because they think, I can only sell one connection. I'm only going to get this customer to go to one place, whether it be Frankfurt or Amsterdam or London. So then they're trying to actually play us off against each other. They try to play us off against each other in terms of the pricing or the deals they get. And so we've had to learn very differently about how to manage a channel, how to set up those channel relationships without moving away from our base principles, which is we are community-based organizations and we're here for the good of the internet, not to make people a lot of money.
Yeah, and to add to this, indeed what Ben said, we introduced the partner program already, it's about 8 years ago now. So the partner program, with that I mean the reseller program. As we saw a really big demand for networks wanting to connect to the M6, but they didn't want either to buy colocation in one of the data centers that we were in, or they just didn't want to have a physical presence in Amsterdam anyway, and we still wanted to make it easy for them to connect and interconnect with all the other networks with us. So that's the reason why we introduced the program. And that's basically the classic reseller program. That's how it started. But nowadays there are many new, inventive new models that we also introduced quite recently. For example, easy access. Then it's basically the other way around. Then we are acting as a reseller of the transport between the sites. And it's very useful, especially for networks that are, for example, somewhere in a data center far away from Amsterdam. Well, the Netherlands is a small country, but you can still be far away from Amsterdam. And then for these parties that are in a data center somewhere in another city far away from Amsterdam, and they want to get that access, we actually made a partnership with a fiber provider, and we basically offer them the service on a VLAN, including the transport, and they don't have to think about anything. So that really helped also now made it that we actually, like the last years, it was only lots of international customers coming in to M6, and now for the first time in years, we also see a lot of new networks from the Netherlands joining M6 because they didn't have this easy option to connect to M6 before.
Yeah, so that means nowadays we see at least 3 types of remote connections. The classical, what I would say, almost from day zero when internet exchange points were there, a network from far away just bought a remote connection and connected into the exchange. Then came the resellers, the classical resellers, which helped us to connect more networks. The downside may be that for some of the customers, the brand was not necessarily that visible as for direct connections. And now what you did, what DKIX also did, which our outreach program is, that we do the other way around, have partnerships with carriers to reach out directly to the customers, to still have the direct contact to the customers, and also have the better customer connection, I would say.
Yeah, so Links is slightly different in the way that we've done this further outreach. Partly as being the membership organisation, so we have a commitment not to compete with our members. So at the minute we start being able to just pick a single supplier and bring that in, we're taking business away from any of our members. A lot of them are domestic carriers and want to be able to sell that connection into the exchange. So what we did do, though, is recognise that there were parts of the country in the UK that actually had enough demand for peering that rather than make London a single point of failure, let's start to try and make the ecosystem in the UK better. And so that's when we launched the exchange in Manchester, and that's now doing huge amounts of traffic. It's got well over 100 members now. We then went into Scotland and then finally into Wales and Cardiff. And there's been other pockets of the UK that have asked us to put an IX in, but as most people know, there has to be enough density there for it to make sense. I think one of the things that we find that the remote peering in terms of the reseller programs, the demand is there particularly for us because the size that we are as international peering points. And speaking to other IXPs that are of a smaller scale, they don't see the same sort of demand for reseller programs. And it's quite a lot of resource to develop a reseller program. It's a lot of resource from the technical side to actually get the programming in. The billing is actually even more complicated. You then need to work out how you're going to work with charging essentially a net different price to people. We have an additional issue at Links because everybody pays a membership fee as well, and there's no way that we're going to give anything back on a membership fee. But the biggest thing is about how many are people really going to want to get to you remotely? Enough people want to get to you remotely to set up a reseller program. So I've been in the US for 3 years now, and the US is a little like Brazil, and very much more so than the UK or Holland for sure, in that it's a vast, vast country. And because of that, there isn't one single main peering point. So in the UK, just everything goes to London. In Holland, everything goes to Amsterdam. And even Germany, that's a lot bigger geographically, most of the traffic goes to Frankfurt. But you don't see that in the US. In the US, there are some hubs, New York, Ashburn, the Bay Area, LA, Dallas to a certain extent, Atlanta to a certain extent, but none of these are far and away the single biggest point that everybody wants to get to. And same here in Brazil. You have such a vast geography that you have peering points all the way around the country because you need to actually have a lot more local peering. And so in some of those instances, remote peering or resellers programs isn't necessarily the answer. And you may find that you're putting more resource into doing something like that than just allowing a straight long line or layer to interconnect.
I'd like to ask you about the reseller programs. When a partner make a remote connection, do they choose specific contents or partners to peer, or they participate in a multilateral peer agreement? How? Because it's difficult to have all the access to all the layer 2 domain, or technically it's difficult to connect. I think in France IX, they told me that they have a specific amount of MAC address that they allowed in the connection. How does it work for you?
So I think there's two things there. One is in terms of the peering arrangements that they set up. We don't get involved in that at all. Their port is their port, whether it's a virtual port or whether it's a physical port, and members make peering agreements between each other. So no reseller will come in and have a bulk agreement with peers, because the peers on the other side want to know those other ASs. But in terms of the restrictions on the lands, yeah, we absolutely rate limit on ports. We have a surcharge and a capacity surcharge, and we do not allow resellers to oversell ports, because there is that. No. Although the utilization is typically 25-30% on each individual VLAN, we don't want risk at all things being oversold. So we do not allow any overselling, and so yeah, MAC address limitations is part of that.
Yeah, that's basically the same at DKIX. So what we do is we rate limit and shape each resell port. That means the reseller tells us this customer wants to connect with 1 gigabit, and he is, for example, reselled on a 100 gig port. Then what we do is we install a VLAN, and then this VLAN is shaped and rate limit to exactly 1 gigabit. And as we precisely know how much connections are on the resell port, we also can guarantee that the port is not oversubscribed. That's the same as with links. As for limiting of MAC addresses, I'm not 100% sure what you mean by that. So each customer, be it a direct connection or resell, while a reseller has access to all other MAC addresses. There's no limitations. Yes, but one per AS, but you are able to reach everyone else. So.
Okay.
Yeah, at ON6 it's not much different, I guess. So actually the service, it can be a 10 gig port or a 100 gig port on single mode fiber. And it's assigned specifically for reselling to customers. And we allow multiple MAC addresses as well, 1 MAC address per AS. And then we use VLAN tagging 802.1q to separate the different customers. So I guess it's roughly the same system as you are using. Then the partner, they rate limit the end customer. And we invoice the partner based on the agreed capacity. And then we have a fixed fee that we charge per VLAN, and so each capacity that you can pick, it is from 100 Mbit is the minimum, and then we have a fixed fee per VLAN that we charge, and then the partner invoices the end customer, and they can basically they are free to charge whatever they want. We do not interfere in that, so they can put a margin on top if they want. And that's basically how it works. So it's a very simple service, very easy, and for us it has been really driver of growth, and we continue to see that in also including with the new models that we introduced recently.
Ok. Gostaria também de abrir o espaço para perguntas aí do.
Now the audience can pose questions. We have 3 very important speakers. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, please feel free to pose your questions.
Hello, good morning, everyone. It's Fernando Frigiani. We have seen a movement recently here in Brazil that some ISPs are willing to peer with some of the IX in Europe, like the 3 of you. And there are some discussions if it's worth or not, because being in Europe, it's okay, the latency is not that much, and it makes sense also due to an extra reliability. So as you mentioned, you could be in links in Amsterdam and have a redundancy there. But when you peer from Brazil to any of the IXs there, you need to get some transport, and that not always is as cheap as IP transit. And there are some questions if it makes sense or not, or if it makes more sense to invest in a good IP transit from here. Because talking to some friends that work on big telecom companies here in Brazil, some of them, they say, no, it's not worth even for us. So imagine for the smaller ones. So what do you think? Do you think there are scenarios that it's worth to peer even from Brazil? Or if it's better to maybe invest in a good international transit IP?
I guess there is no easy answer to these questions. I guess there may be good reasons to do both. It much depends on what you are looking for. If, for example, I could imagine if a network has a strategy to have its network spread out to Europe to establish a point of presence, then it would definitely make sense also for a remote peering as a first step. Because what you, in the first step, what you still save is to put your own equipment over there. You only have to rent capacity into, let's say, London or into Amsterdam or into Frankfurt or wherever, and then start to roll out your plans. The next would be to put a router over there, to put more equipment over there, to put servers over there, and also to put customers over there. If your strategy is to stay local, then perhaps it does not make any sense. But even perhaps for a local network where the customer with a partner over there in Europe and who says, okay, what I need is a good connection to Europe, it still could make sense, because if you have a customer which relies on good connectivity, direct relations between networks, then perhaps a direct connection into an exchange point somewhere else in the world doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think the last point is probably the most pertinent from my point of view. It's a business strategy decision. And let's be honest, peering we're here, IXPs are here to really pick up that long tail of traffic for people. Now, the majority of traffic is everywhere else. It's, even though the size we are, we know that our role is for the majority of networks to provide that long tail. And so typically, you wouldn't just come over to Europe from Brazil only to peer. No, you'd be coming because there is a customer case. You've got a customer case, customer demand to do that. And that customer case is more likely to dictate how you connect, whether you use transport or IP transit, than anything to do with the IXP. And however you decide to do that for your customer case, you'll then go, okay, we're going to connect into an IX or we're not, because the journey's there.
Talking about that customer case, I would be really interested to hear from maybe someone in the audience that has a network and that they are peering remotely into Europe. And we see this is really growing. There's a lot of networks from Brazil coming into Europe to peer. Why do you do it? What is the business case? I would be really interested to hear if someone can explain why. Usually what we see is the Brazilian networks that come to us, they connect with very small capacity, 100 Mbits, 250, maybe 1000. They usually use a carrier. I'm not going to give a name, but it's a carrier where they can also buy IP transit from, but they still also use a portion of the capacity for peering. And I would be really interested to learn why that is and what the business case is. So if there's someone in the audience to explain to me, I would be glad to talk. Yeah.
Okay, maybe later we'll gonna have two ISPs. Okay. Maybe they can answer your question.
That will be good. So.
Yeah. Okay. And okay. Alguém mais tem alguma pergunta?
Any more questions from our audience? Well,
the definition of remote peering, because as Arnold said, it depends on the latency. And I think here in Brazil, we do a lot of remote peering based on the latency only, okay? And in terms of, again, in the model, you say that in some cases, the participant put a router in the infrastructure, okay? And how is this work? It's in data centers where you have presence, or the IX is involved in the business, in the collocation? How is the model? How an IX or an autonomous system in Brazil can look for connection in your IXs?
So I feel that there were two parts to that, really. So I'll try and take the first part. No, I was talking earlier about how you have so many more remote peering points in Brazil, or remote peering lands, sorry, in Brazil. But if they're still coming in remotely, then just to go back to an earlier point on the reseller program, the one thing reseller programs enable us to do as well is to actually manage our switches a bit better, our routers a bit better, because technology moves on. And if we have to fill a router with 100 Mbit line cards, or even gig line cards, that gets quite expensive in terms of the density of the equipment that we're using. So actually, by being able to just have a router that's full of 10 gig line cards, for example, and then we let the resellers bring that lower capacity traffic in, makes it a lot easier to manage. Now, we don't do that at Links in London, but our it's not a sister exchange, but the other exchange in London, LoanApp, have been moving towards trying to do that, make things a lot easier to do that. So they do partial port now to enable their members to come in. But to the main part of your question, how do we facilitate people coming in remotely and putting a router in our facility? It really depends where you want to come into. So some of the carriers in London, for example, will all drop in telehouse. It's the biggest peering point in London. It's one of the most interconnected places on the planet. In fact, probably Ashburn's the only place that comes close to it now. We found over time that all of our members, whether they're coming in remotely or not, really struggled to go through all the paperwork they needed to do to work with telehouse, especially if you're international, you're a company that they hadn't heard of before. And so we now have an arrangement with them that we have parts of co-location space that we resell to our members. So the members use us as a one-stop shop. They can come in if they want to actually drop a router in and then make a connection inside the facility. We help them do that in places like telehouse. We do similar with interaction as well, but telehouse is the main place people want to come into. Don't know if that answers your question at all.
Okay.
So when we started DKIX in 95, we really had the approach not only to sell a connection to the switching fabric, but also to offer collocation for the members' equipment. And even when we started, there was a single price for the connection, basically even for two connection, and I guess even for a full rack of rack space at a full price. So over time, of course, we changed our fee model, and nowadays we do not longer sell rack space, collocation space, but we still have a lot of collocation customers. And what we also do is to help customers who want to have collocation to get collocated at one of the main sites.
Yeah, at OMSIX, we do not sell co-location or offer rack space, but it might be something we will look into if it is, especially with the easy access offering and some new products that we are developing. It might be interesting to actually do that with the vision of making it as easy as possible for customers to connect and having everything on one contract. So this is not there yet, but we are thinking into models of actually just making it easy and to also for enterprises, for example, you do not want to have them running around and learning how this BGP thing works. You want to just make it as easy as possible to just get the service, get the connectivity, but not having to worry about everything what's behind it. So basically, we're looking at new ways of developing services that fit into that profile.
Ok. Bom, obrigado. Vamos agora.
Thank you very much. Now we will have a coffee break, and we will reconvene at 11 a.m. And then we will have the participation of the submarine cable carriers in the ISPs.
And you come back in the second part, okay? You can stay in here, sure. Okay? And yeah, and coffee break there. Yeah. And then coffee break again. Yeah. And at the end, I think if they.
Yeah, so we'll move to the end.
Well, next, let's resume the remote peering panel. You are all invited to join us here again.
O palco. Bom, queria chamar o Adriano Caldevilla, da Globinet, o Darwin Costa, da...
So we have Angola Cables, representative, Altared Incorporate, and Said from Mobi Telecom.
Está faltando o Said, não sei onde ele está. Bom, então a ideia agora é a gente ter 4 apresentações aí.
So the suggestion now is to have each one's presentations. Let's start by Adriano from GloboNet. Adriano and Darwin, they are here representing the subsea carriers, and they will also talk about remote peering. Good morning. I am part of the IP network engineer team for GlobeNet. The goal here today is to share how we see the importance of peering in Europe and how can we take the remote peering to some other partners here in Brazil. So, how have we started? The GlobeNet network. We have 2 cables, the north and the south ring. But for this presentation, we should stick to IP network, right? So our IP network has a point of interconnection, Miami, New York, Fortaleza, Rio, and São Paulo. As part of our joint efforts, the idea is to reach contents as fast as possible and cheaper. With that, we carried out some traffic analysis and understood that some of the content coming from Europe were being taken by our offstrings, paid ones. So we had to understand the volume of traffic to understand if we should extend our network to Europe via partners. Then we decided to contract a network to reach Europe. Positive results. So now I will show you what we see from our network in relation to the Brazilian traffic. And not only the Brazilian traffic had justified this effort to reach Europe. We also have networks in Colombia, Venezuela, and with all of that together, we had enough justification to get to Europe. Once we were there, there was a traffic interest. And today, we use such an extension to our own IP network for IX routes, but we also extend that demand as there was an interest shown by our partners who would like to reach the IXs. And with that, we have a system which can reach internet exchanges and to extend those to ISPs in Brazil. We are present today at those IXs. New York, Amsterdam, London, and New York. And Frankfurt, I'm sorry. How do we do that? It's quite simple. There is no magic, nothing complicated about that. We have IX connections. We extend that by the VPN networks to our client who asks, let's say, I want 200 mega, and the advantage of doing that with VPN is that it's much easier, 100, 200 mega, 1 giga, no problem to us. We just take the VPN to New York, where we have an interconnection point with the IXs. We extend the VLAN to the 6, whatever the partner wants to. I don't know if you can get my point from the slide. That's why we may take to ISP a connection to Europe via a cost where there is no need to invest or maybe to have a server over there to reach those IXs. Here are some tables from D6 Frankfurt showing the importance. 6 Tira, not only just to Brazil, but to the world, of course. And those statistics, they highlight the importance of those IXs. This is the IX New York statistics for remote peering. There is no standard for remote peering. We chose that solution of taking that throughout a VPN, and it's working fine so far. Total links. That's ours. From our network, the GlobeNet network, we can also see partners' network once they connected via L2, but then we lose their visibility. But from GlobeNet, I consider quite important to have flow tools. Without a flow tool, that would be so complicated. Today, since the GlobeNet network to our clients, I see much traffic to Hessner. What's Hessner? As simple as visiting their online page. Well, that makes sense. That is a data center in Germany with a very high traffic volume. Is that worthwhile? Yes, perfect. That's why the flow too is important. You do not want to see at the table your page. So that's a traffic that should be caught in Brazil, not in Europe. Well, for those of you who do remote peering, you should be aware of that. A traffic from Turin going to Brazil, come on, there is one in New York, in Miami. We should consider that. With that flow, you can tell who's using that traffic from the CIX Frankfurt. That is being visualized from the GlobeNet network. São Paulo consumes quite a lot, and you can visualize that by different areas, and then you can tell which area is consuming more traffic. In that case was the D6. Here the Amsterdam ASNS origin. When that chart was designed, I did that for Brazil. I did not consider neither Colombia nor Venezuela, because I want really to have an example, a local example. Well, you know, there's AS, which sends traffic to Brazil. Fine. But how is that? What is the content from Europe to Brazil? Why isn't that content coming from São Paulo or from Fortaleza or from Rio de Janeiro, and rather from Amsterdam? Well, we have been seeing much traffic for APTV applications. We have some limitations. We do not open packages. We can just see source and destination. And now talking to our customers, ISPs, we have been doing a test with different PTV boxes, with games, Xbox, and they do look for content. And content from data center with a very important traffic. To larger carriers, the traffic may be more important to someone and not to all, because you might need a traffic, but maybe not 5 giga, but 100 mega or 50 mega, and you have to analyze case by case. You have to understand if that is worthwhile or not. And in my opinion, a partner should have a partner checking the flow for that to be a support and not a problem. Considering content, if I see that there is an American content, fine, it can be, but I have to investigate. I have to know why and how to avoid that. All the ASs here, they have a BGP community. And you can choose just to have a bilateral. Well, there is an interest here for the wall stream. They try to close, you try to close a bilateral with them in some cases. The only way to know what type of traffic you have there, to know if it's worthwhile or not, why am I taking that traffic in Europe or in the States and not in Brazil, you check the site. Now there are new products for Latin America, a game server for Latin America. Why is a game server for Latin America being hosted in Amsterdam? Well, I don't know. We had conducted tests with Xbox and PlayStation, and sometimes the guy who's playing in Brazil is connected to a server in Amsterdam. Well, this is a game reasoning. It's not really my cup of tea, but it's a reality, and we have to face it and get adapted to it. Here we have a traffic coming from AM6. This is a view from the GlobeNet network. As I told you before, we cannot see other networks. It would not make any sense showing you other networks now, he says. Someone mentioned previously about the advantage of connecting or to use to connect to GlobeNet for remote peering. There are advantages, such as direct connection, game service content, video streamer, all of that is here in this data center. They are there, and the only thing I'm sure about is because I see the traffic. And we also deliver solution. We deliver solution, and that's how it works. If our solution does not work, we fix it. Presence at the main axis. The largest world axis are here today being represented, and it's very interesting to add that in the peering DB. Sometimes when you connect, you don't even know that there is someone trying to take some traffic to your region, maybe a university or something. Well, I see you are in the Frankfurt 6AS. Okay, fine. Then you close the peering. And peering is responsible for the internet, as you all know. Another piece of advantage by connecting your routes directly. Once you connect directly to AS, you will no longer see the GlobeNet AS, at least in the international ones. It generates a better visibility to your routes, and that is good for tools and others that do BGP hacking of your net. And also, if your customer has two providers, there you have a greater chance to get traffic from the competitor. This is another important advantage if you connect directly to the I-axis, to the Internet exchange points. Thank you. Any questions?
Obrigado, Adriano. Chamar o Darwin.
Bom dia a todos.
Good morning. It's a great honor to be here in São Paulo for the first time. All conferences, they are addressed in English. But I am from Portugal, so I will speak Portuguese. So, remote peering is the topic, of course. Remote peering has been released by our company this year. due to a commercial demand by our customers and also internal commercial demand that led us to develop this operational and active product. At our first phase, we worked with we try to sort out all the business issues, agreements. Our peering port should be converted not only for peering used by MOLA cables, but also for resellers peering. So from a technical perspective, we got prepared. As to transport, this is what we do in our company. We operate submarines systems, so VPN over our NPLS platform. There is no need to reinvent the wheel. And we support all of that with existing sub cables, which the Western African cable system is a cable which links the Western African coast going through some African countries, going through 3 European countries, and final destination is London. There is an African demand by English colonies to have a system to links. We are under the second upgrade phase of the system. Then we have the SAX, that's our new cable. This is a sub system which was recently implemented, interlinking Africa to South Africa, Angola, and Brazil with 40 terabits. And then we have a WAX, that is a consortium, and the system is designed for 24 terabytes. Although you see 14 there, it can cope with 24. We link the greatest, the largest PPTs, I'm sorry, and we have to partner with those with their own fibers, and now we have a net with 10 giga, which may reach up to 100 gigabytes. Definitions. Let me ask this community, how many of you use remote peering services today or at this moment? So how many? Can you raise your hands? Thank you. Just a few. So the question is quite obvious. So we have strategy. For anyone who acquires this service, you have to have a well-defined strategy, local, global, local. That strategy for peering and net expansion has to be defined. Ben also commented about the business case. A business case should make sense. If it does not make sense, that business case, well, business case is a demand that should make sense for you to buy the remote peering or to extend your net. So these two definitions that you see on the screen, operators like us, Global Net and cables, we have that implemented infrastructure. A customer who would like to buy that service from us, there is a dedicated port with multiple VLANs, and the client indicates what is the IX to which he wants to interconnect anywhere in the world. That's why we have that partnership with the PTTs. From a cost standpoint, with remote peering, the client has a direct partnership with the owner of the infrastructure. There is an installation cost and associated monthly rate for that, but at the IX port, there is no need to pay anything, the cross connection, neither the portal. So that relation is done directly between the client and the infrastructure vendor. Benefits. We may reach those PTTs today. D6, New York and Frankfurt. We also have links. New York Internet Exchange Point also reached Africa. That's the largest. Also in Johannesburg and Cape Town. We also have a point in Angola. That's very important for Brazil and Angola exchange. We also have a partnership with NIC.br, maybe to change paradigms. We've heard that there is much need from Brazil, from Americas to Europe. And how about Africa to Brazil, Europe to Brazil? Well, we have to research, understand, and reach a conclusion. We are working with M6 to see if we can close also that partnership and start delivering services to Amsterdam as well. How to interconnect? That's so simple. We offer a port at the same presence point where the customer is. We carry out a cross connection to that port that we will allocate to the client or to prospective. And then at that port, those entities of larger port with 10 to 100 gigas to guarantee a well-served demand with no constraints. And at this single port or single interface, we have a client who had defined VLANs and PPTs. We take that to IX 250 mega or 500 mega. All of that will depend on that previous study that may be fancy to be linked to all those PTTs, but that requires further studies to understand if it's worthwhile or if you will one day get linked to some other points of internet exchange. I would like to thank PeerInDB here on behalf of Arnold. We have everything documented, illustrated. If you have any additional interest, just search for further information and you'll find a list of those places where you can get connected. Use case, I wish I could present that to you, but as we have just released the product, we don't have any case yet, but I guess that by next year at this time, we'll be able to bring some use cases. Let's say that a customer bought one and one of the IX has a problem. Who to contact? Ourselves? How do we work with that? So we hope that in 1 year time we can introduce a very relevant use case. Thank you.
Thank you. I will call Mario now. Good morning to everyone. I am Mario Gula. I am an engineering director from Alta Rede. What I will show you is our network. I will talk about our strategy, why we connected to the main international peerings. Alta Rede is present in the entire country. Alta Rede emerged in Rio de Janeiro and little by little build an optic network. Today, our main capillarity is in the state of Rio de Janeiro, but we're also present in São Paulo, Espírito Santo with our own network, and part of the state of Minas Gerais. São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, within our initial strategy, we try to connect ourselves to all the data centers of the city of Rio de Janeiro and that of São Paulo. So within the strategy, our main objective was to connect ourselves to the main exchange points, traffic exchange points. This strategy of connecting to the main traffic exchange points, well, we grew And every time you have a new pop outside of Rio and São Paulo, we try to connect ourselves to the local PICs. This strategy this promoted the quality of the internet, and we were able to provide better services to our customers because the peaks are important points when you connect yourself to a customer and to make new business. Currently, we are present in São Paulo, PIC São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Victoria, Fortaleza, Brasília, and we're already present and we have networks in other cities, but we still haven't connected ourselves yet. Nevertheless, our strategy is to connect ourselves when possible to the local peaks of the city. Within our strategy of connection to the peaks, there is no doubt that as well as what has already been mentioned, the connection to international peaks has become more accessible, cheaper, and more feasible because of the facility of technology, the technical facility of connecting ourselves, and mainly because of the accessible prices. Therefore, we see international peaks like what happened here in Brazil. Naturally, the Brazilian ASs will start to look for this connection and they will want to be in these points of traffic exchange, and we believe that the main target is to give quality to your customers. Now, there is no doubt that in addition to the quality that you give to customers, this is a way, as what has mentioned, AS will appear in the main data centers, the main peaks, and the enterprise will be seen as in a different way. This can bring new businesses and bring new opportunities as well. So this was our strategy to connect ourselves to the national and international peaks. Now, this information is simple information. It is very important to have management tools, flow tools, to make the best of the connection that you have with these peaks. We internally, we installed these tools not a very long time ago, about 6 months ago, so we are still making these adjustments. We receive a lot of information. In the past used to be a black box, and now we can see them clearly, and now we can create a strategy for growth and to improve our traffic, to improve our quality, and of course to provide better services to our customers. Very briefly, in this chart that you can see here from our traffic, our total traffic, 30% approximately is transit. We have a number of connections with transit operators. 30% go to these carriers, traffic carriers. 40%, 41% of our traffic comes from the CDNs. We have a number of CDNs in our network. And this reality must be very similar to the most of the ISPs in Brazil. We also have some P&I connections. And these connections represent approximately 14% of our traffic. And here you can see how much of our traffic goes to IX Brazil and in all the IXs that were present, and mainly Rio, São Paulo, as our main operation is still based in the state of Rio de Janeiro. Most of the IX traffic is from Rio de Janeiro because there is no doubt that we want to access the content that is closer. And São Paulo, there's no doubt, as the greatest exchange point of network in Brazil. And we are present here, but the table here shows us that with the CDNs and PNIs, our traffic in IXBR has dropped a lot throughout the time. With these policies of traffic engineer and always looking for content in the closest place. Now the international IXs, Well, I believe that we have been doing this for 6 months. In the beginning, we didn't have all the analysis tools, so we activated in the dark. We were carrying out tests in the dark, but when we deployed the new tools, well, we were able to analyze things accurately, especially verifying what comes through transit. There is no doubt that the content that comes through transit is a content that we want to make direct connections with them, with this that represent a lower cost and represent a better quality for the customer. And with this, you can have traffic engineering and you can have better control. With direct connections, you can better control the traffic and the policies of traffic engineering. Now, what we have observed within transit, the content that we receive through transit would be Brazilian contents. Now, obviously, Alta Rede still does not have connections with all the carriers peerings, with all the carriers or peerings, but there's a lot of traffic that is obtained through transit. So Brazil is number one, then comes the US. And what we observed up till the date was that the other contents are smaller. They, especially when they come from South America, this is Argentina mainly, and when they come from Europe, it's England and Canada. Well, Canada is North America. As we have IX, England and Canada appear in transit because Frankfurt, Amsterdam, we are already collecting, from these points. So now we want to analyze this in details. We want to verify where we're driving more content and trying to bring this content directly to our network. And I believe this should be everybody's homework. So here we're showing you our CIX. The international traffic that we have of IX is very small when we compare it to the total amount of traffic that we have in our network. But this is very natural because there is no doubt that the main contents that we receive, and this is a trend, come to Brazil and they establish themselves in Brazil. So when a company has a need to have major traffic in Brazil, the natural pathway is to bring this content to Brazil. This is why we believe that, and when we observe the small volume compared to the rest, but from our point of view, it is very important because of what we mentioned regarding the quality to our customers, and visibility and the opportunity of businesses. Other enterprises that are present in the main data centers will see that Alta Rede as a partner to make business in Brazil. Our next steps would be to activate the peaks in England, because we've seen that there are some opportunities for content there, and there's no doubt the U.S., because they have a reasonable amount of traffic, and we could also increase this, connecting other peaks to the United States. Thank you very much to everyone. Here you have my business contacts. Said.
Bom dia, good morning.
Good morning to everyone. I am Said. I am from Mob Telecom. For those that don't know this company, this is the hub of telecommunications of the countries in Fortaleza, and I will talk about this subject. Well, I would like to greet everyone, Julio, Salvador, the entire team here. It's cool to be the fourth to present, because both Angola and GlobeNet gave a very technical explanation about this matter, and I will now talk about the view of a businessman, of an entrepreneur, okay? Regarding this matter. So this is a different view, okay? This is the entrepreneurial point of view. We already have peering remote. We are present. We work with GlobeNet, we work with Angola, we work with a number of submarine cable, and our advantage is to have these different options to have remote peering with a number of carriers. We're present in AMX, NAP, London, Rio de Janeiro, and others. And the mobile strategy is to provide the best experience to an end consumer. This could be through a partner that is the provider, or it can be by something else. Our focus is the consumer's experience, the end consumer's experience. Ready. Now, telecom mob presence. For those that don't know mob telecom, here you have the map of Brazil. This map, you can see how many POPs we have scattered throughout Brazil. So we are present. We have strong presence in Brazil, the center, west, northeast, the north, southeast, the south, Brasilia. And we participate of all the peaks that are possible here together with the PTT. There is always one content that you don't have here or there. And in international remote peerings, we also participate in all of them that you can see here. You can see the little logos here. We participate in all of those remote peerings. Now I will talk about the greatest advantages when you participate in these international points. Now, the greatest advantages are that we are able to give our end consumers some type of contents that do not exist in Brazil. For instance, the major contents, Google, Facebook, whatever, all of them, there are certain contents that are in Europe, even in the US, and you don't have that experience in Brazil. So this is a differential. So this is a great advantage that we have. We offer something different. At the same time, as of the moment, you go to Amsterdam, you get there, you have the opportunity to do direct peering with local content or contact with European content or the rest of the world. This is a better experience. Without mentioning quick deployment, cost reduction, you don't have to spend a lot of money, and you eliminate the cost of collocation, and there is a reduction in the IP cost as well. Now, some warnings, because we say that all is a bed of roses, but not everything is a bed of roses. So when we talk about remote peering, we think about latency. Everybody is always talking about latency. This is a buzzword, right? Better latency, this latency. But when we talk about latency, we have to analyze remote peering, and we have to see what is the path of the submarine cable that we're going to use. There's no use going to Amsterdam and then you have simple latency. So the path of the cables has to be intelligent. Where am I going? Going to England, right? Our friend here is going to England. What is the submarine cable that he's going to use? If he chooses bad the cable, he's going to have terrible service. You're going to have a delay here if you don't choose right your submarine cables. And here we have our carriers, and we work with everyone. Okay, we work with all of them. For some content, certainly we have the best latency. The main cities where we're present: São Paulo, Rio, Brasília, Fortaleza. Here, definition. I will talk about remote peering in Brazil. What's happening here in Brazil? The local players more and more are working with IX, are more present. From Porto Alegre to Fortaleza. Today, the PTT of Fortaleza is the PTT that grows most in Brazil. If you're not in Fortaleza, well, I believe São Paulo, Rio, but you have to be in Fortaleza, okay? So MOBA is a strong partner of IX. I think that in 2004, 2005, in the beginning, we were one of the first, and we are participating in a number of PTTs in Brazil. We have approached other that we intend to deploy in 2019. We want to participate in them until we become six in some case. We want to become six in some cases. And a very important point here would be the PTT São Paulo. Everybody talks about PTT São Paulo, and one of our strategies was to be present in all the four major PTTs here. So we have this. We have these redundancies here. So each PTT has a different type of content. SP1, 2, 3, 4, they don't have the same content. Some have some things, the others have other things. So it's important to have this diversity. The network architecture has to have this intelligence, and it has to be diverse. Thank you very much. To end here, because I was very brief, I will mention a number of things. Currently, Mob Telecom is an enterprise that is pursuing entrepreneurship. And we like to be entrepreneurs. I would like to thank the IX team for inviting us. And I promise that MOB will always, defend the union of the carriers of everyone. Good morning to everyone and have a great day. No, this testimonial and everybody's presentation was so interesting. And now we have 10 minutes for our Q&A session. I believe that people from the internet exchanges that have questions and wanted to ask questions to the carriers and to the ISPs, I believe that some explanations were made here. So if you're interested in asking very specific subjects or vice versa, so enterprises can pose questions to the internet exchanges, and our audience can also. I am Wesley Correia. I am from Telecom Consultoria, and I would like to thank the participation of you here and for sharing your knowledge and your experience with us. But I would even like to ask you, what is your view about the exchange of regional providers with exchange traffic abroad? Very different. Some of you that are carrier IP that deal with the national market, is it really an advantage for a carrier that deals with 1, 2, 3 cities in Brazil that has a reduced infrastructure to look for traffic abroad because perhaps they won't save latency? They would be changing 150 milliseconds of direct transport for 110 plus 40. So they would be exchanging 6 by half a dozen. Is it really worthwhile to do this, or would it be better to be more accurate in the right choice of your IP transit? Would this be more efficient? I believe that from my point of view, if a regional carrier chooses the IP transit with good points, I would be that they would have better service if they would invest in a number of small transits of 200, 300, 1 giga to be present in all these points and to generate a demand of special labor that he doesn't have, and he will have to outsource this. I would like to know your point of view, if it's really worthwhile to do all of this. I believe that your question is timely. I believe that any regional operator, before hiring an IP transit, company has to see the paths, but it is interesting for a small proportion of your end consumers that are more demanding. They will want this experience, perhaps. Today, for example, 5 years ago, we accessed the internet to go to Wall, to go to Globo, to go to the newspaper. Now we want to watch games, movies. Someone from games, if he kicks the ball in one, if he takes more time, he can miss an opportunity and he will lose the game. So the experience of the end consumer is important here. So you have to properly choose these international paths. IP paths. Now, in the case of an international exchange point, can you guarantee this with technical data? We're talking about technical data. You're going to gain 10 milliseconds of latency, and if you choose properly your IP transit, it will provide you the same latency and the same as if you were connected because of 10, 20, 100, 200 mega.
It's about control of your traffic and knowing your traffic's going to be there. So, 10 milliseconds one way or the other potentially doesn't make a difference. But if packet loss is important to you, then maybe having your own transport or using transport rather than IP transit is the route you want to go. And so these sorts of examples, like gaming, where suddenly you have somebody respawn faster than you and you lose the game. Financial transactions, voice over IP services, things where it's actually more about reducing that packet loss and controlling the routes and reducing the number of hops you have actually is much more important than the latency when you're talking small percentages of milliseconds.
Talvez nesse caso,
Perhaps here the solution would be to bring traffic to exchange points of Brazil, not going abroad, because an idea of an exchange point is to maintain regional traffic that has to be regional. And, like we defend not that someone from Manaus has to exchange traffic when someone in Amapá, when someone in São Paulo. You must have an interconnection that is regional so they don't have to run 1,000, 2,000 kilometers of optic cables. Perhaps, let's say, Angola Cables is doing something excellent, bringing the content from there to here, instead of going there and fetch it there. This is something that I've been analyzing. I would like to know what we could do about it. When you ask if it's worthwhile in terms of cost, we believe that. Adriano, could you please speak into the microphone? Yes. The cost, thanks to technology, the cost of reaching these IXs shouldn't be more expensive than what you pay for your IP transit. This is our policy at GlobeNet, because otherwise your bill at the IX is going to be so expensive. Another thing, you said to bring the content to Brazil. There are many variables here. There is a lot of content that you cannot bring to Brazil. Like in Amsterdam, you have to consider the laws. The legal part of content. In Amsterdam and Frankfurt, well, they're a bit more flexible with internet laws. You will never bring this content to Brazil unless there is a change in the Brazilian legislations. So yes, there are certain contents that you will have to go to Europe and fetch them in Frankfurt, Links, Amsterdam. And I believe that the important point is this, to reduce the cost and the control. Control. This is your option if you want to control this traffic or not. In GlobeNet, we have NICs and IP transit. I am an IP engineer. I want you to remain with IP. DNX is to facilitate your life, your logic of how your network works. If you already have the flow, if you want 100 mega for Amsterdam, you have already identified 100 mega of traffic in Amsterdam. You separate a VLAN of your service, you install it there. Now the cost shouldn't be higher than what you pay per IPA transit. Well, cost, and important is not only to assess the cost of transport, but the operational cost of having a professional, because as we're saying, in regional carriers of 1-2 giga, not all carriers have a network engineer that can deal with these policies. This is very expensive for the cash flow of the provider. Sometimes they don't have a router of this capacity so that they can do these things. This is when we say about approaching, it would be optimizing everything. It is important to equalize this cost for transport for a foreign IX point. You need the tools and you need an engineer that is paying attention. No, he doesn't come once a week to see your network. He has to be constantly analyzing this network to maintain this control. But who buys this buys it because they believe that everything is working in a blink of an eye. But as a network engineer, we know that things don't work in a blink of an eye, and this depends on a good logistics. So thank you very much. This was just my question.
Estão me ouvindo? Agora sim. Antônio Moreiras, do IX.br. Alguns de vocês citaram...
Well, some of you had mentioned in your business cases games and streaming. So my first question is, can you list a name of games or some companies where that takes place? And my second question is, would you run the risk to say why quality is being better or bigger in search to direct contents and not throughout transit? What are the transit or traffic companies doing wrong? I'm talking about the national network willing to have a greater control over the routes. If that's not the case, though, if the guy is just looking for higher quality and he says that he can get a better quality if he gets the content directly from Europe via internet exchange, how come does that happen technically? Could you elaborate or speculate a little bit more about that? In fact, in my opinion, as to quality, I cannot tell you that you have less latency if you connect to Amsterdam via VPN network or normal by my IP transit. I cannot say anything about that, sorry. And you have the IP and MPLS. When you come via VPN, you have a preferential transit there. In our case, GlobeNet, we never have a projection at the network, so the quality of our IP transit is the same as in the VPN. We just focus a bit more if to you. To some providers may not, but if to you, if you would like to have your routers better seen abroad, if you'd like to control the traffic, if you want to access IX at your peering DB with more interconnections by yourself, if you have interest and if you have resources, it's worthwhile. That's my opinion. Today, the focus is network architecture. So each region of the country has a different way of doing things. For example, those who live in the countryside, not in the seaside, they spend more time at home, online, games, content, than if someone who lives at the coast that spends more time outside. So our company tries to better understand what is the user's profile, to understand control and to find the best routes to that public. So it's all a matter of details, and everything is so new yet. But for sure, the experience for someone who plays games, who plays streaming, to live by a VLAN directly to Europe. And in Europe, you can do a direct peering with a game company or a game provider. The quality and the experience is 1,000 times better than ours down here. At GlobeNet chart, they showed a map of the cities, and there is a city in the countryside of the state of Ceará and another one in Maranhão. These two states are really further north Brazil. In Fortaleza, the map was not so hot like those two countryside or interior cities up north the country. This is my comment.
From the floor and the speakers here, all on the access side, and there is the other side of the equation. It's that the content businesses, they're businesses too. They've got to find out and work out what works best for them. So Riot Games, for example, they run the League of Legends game. Their policy is to have hubs. So even in Europe, they're hubbed in Amsterdam, and then they remote peer out to Frankfurt and London. So even when you are playing the game and you feel like you're hosting in your home in Manchester, actually that's really coming out of London or Amsterdam. But it's a lot closer, because for them they have to have enough density, enough gamers, enough population to make that work. And as I was just saying. Yesterday, when you end up with a population that's spread over such a vast geography, then those numbers are harder for the content providers to work. So in the UK, for example, the BBC is a huge content provider. They have multiple 100 gig ports in London, but they see demand for traffic all over the world. But it really doesn't make sense for them to actually pop anywhere else in the world, because it's small percentages, a little bit like Mario was saying he sees from out in Europe. And so if you want to be able to have that direct connection with the BBC, and they don't really match this kind of latency issue because it's just content, but you need to then be in London to pick that up through peering, or you pick that up through transit. But from the content provider's point of view, unless you start to get to be hyperscale, or you're using the CDNs, it's really, really expensive to actually get closer to the edge. But we're seeing it happen. We're seeing more and more deployments like that happen. Both in Africa, as I was saying, we see a lot more traffic being localized in Africa, and I think you'll see some of that more happen in Brazil. But there is another aspect to that, and that's language. And it was interesting that in your map, I think it was Mario, you had stats from different countries, and you had Brazil, and then USA, and then Argentina, and then UK, but no Portugal, which surprised me. No. So the language thing that I would expect to see wasn't coming through. And so for sort of English language content providers, so maybe they're doing sports, showing football games or things like that, if there isn't that local language demand, they're not really going to bring that content on site locally. So you need to then figure out what's the cheapest way to get to them, if it's cost. If my users really care about watching that football match live and they miss that second that the goal is scored, they may move to another subscriber. But if actually they're just looking at cat videos and they don't really care if they miss a little bit of the cat video, then it's less important to me.
Eu vou só, thanks, Ben. Vou só aproveitar aqui para comentar, passar aqui também para o Mário. Aí a sua pergunta, Moreira. A pergunta anterior do Wesley foi muito importante, né? Porque o apuramento, aquilo que a gente já falou, a análise detalhada antes de você escolher o seu provedor é muito importante. Pode-se dar o caso até que você não precisa do serviço de remote peering para nada, porque o seu provedor tem os acordos de peering muito bem feitos, tem uma engenharia de tráfego muito bem otimizada e por aí fora, né? Eu só vou dar um exemplo aqui do use case que aconteceu conosco. A gente, quando iniciou o SAX, há 2 meses atrás, né, antes do SAX, a África do Sul, do ponto de vista, agora falando da África do Sul, que é o maior hub africano, do ponto de vista de IP, eles buscavam tudo na Europa, maioritariamente na Europa, né? Então, a comunidade de gaming, eu fui me envolvendo na comunidade de gaming angolana e na comunidade de gaming sul-africana, nos grupos e por aí fora, só para tentar entender como é que os caras chegavam à conclusão que o ping era alto, que a latência era alta e por aí fora. Então, a gente, quando lançou o SAX, né, a primeira coisa...
Was high. When we released the SAX, the first thing we did was to open a ticket, and the Fortnite is bugging. Fortnite is bugging. I'm not saying about the Fortnite. Where is the Fortnite? And then the guys, they were preparing to see the Fortnite in São Paulo than in Europe. For any reason, the pin was lower than a region, from one region to another. So network and traffic optimization, regardless of the provider you choose, you have to have able engineers to look at that daily and not weekly, as it was mentioned here by GlobalNet. I apologize for missing the beginning of the translation. I'm so sorry. There was a problem here in the device button. Let's go on. So remote peering, it's what we have in Brazil, but abroad. Initially, companies, they are after cost reduction, as it happened in Brazil. Not like the international peering, where the traffic volume is not so representative, but in terms of quality, small details, they differentiate one service from another. Most operators, carriers, they have a very similar service in terms of infrastructure, Japan, fiber. So small details, they do make much difference in hiring a company or another. If I have 1 minus hope to reach a certain content, and if I can have a traffic control, the transit companies, they are not doing anything wrong, but they are just doing exactly always the same thing. They have a skilled team, but let's consider my growth. I cannot address a task which will affect the quality of third parts, the quality of my service, and give that to third parts. No, I prefer to do that myself. Small details, microseconds, traffic controls, they may represent a big difference to the end user or to the client. We are running late. Just 2 brief questions. Adriano, question for you. You said that you do some type of content filtering when you transport from Amsterdam to other cities in Brazil. Can you exemplify that? Well, we choose the contents to our IP network, right? When we extend VLAN to ISP, we do not do anything about that. That is the ISP control. Our control, though, and our IP engineer will give a technical lecture at 4:30 today. But basically, we have a problem. Every time that there is a drop in the BGP session, and they thought that the best way to reach the Brazilian one was Amsterdam, but it was not. We talked to engineers, and the way as they manage the network is better to announce to them in Amsterdam. We know that the IP will always get more from their content, but there are some that may happen. Optimization. As you know, we do not only depend on us, but we depend on the rest of the interconnected networks. If anyone does anything wrong, you have to be aware of that, and that is as simple as sending a community. Do not sell to this or to that one. And if you would allow me, I have a question to the representatives from London, Amsterdam, and DCIX. From a security standpoint, the traffic point structure has been done to solve NDS attack. There is a unicast framework to refrain that. Anything else in terms of using the point of traffic structure for large-scale DDoS attacks? Any initiative from any one of you, as well as there is for DNS structure to refrain attacks using that structure? If there is anything available, any initiative from the traffic exchange point to refrain, to stop DDoS attacks?
Yeah, we at D6 already support DDoS mitigation since a couple of years via the route server, so our customers are able to announce a /32 in case of IPv4 even bigger to the route server. This is then propagated via the route service, and all the other participants are able to pick these announcements up, and then the incoming DDoS traffic is already dropped on the floor on the incoming interface. We are already working since a couple of months on a new DDoS service, which will be launched hopefully soon, which will allow customers even to do more than just announce /32 by the route server. They will have a portal where they are able to specify in more detail what to do with the traffic. For example, just to mitigate DNS traffic, or to rate limit it, or and so on and so on. And these rules will then be put out on the switches where the traffic then is mitigated.
Okay, I'm mainly going to defer to my much more technical partner on my left here. Arnold spent many years as a CTO of an IX. I've spent no days on the technical side of things. But at Links, we don't do any DDoS mitigation ourselves. It's been quite a heated debate topic over the years with our members, whether should we be getting involved with our members' traffic or not. And at the moment, and things could always change, but at the moment the view is that we, as the IX, do not get involved with that. But we try and provide our members as many ways as possible to cope with attacks. One of the big things, if you were here yesterday, I did a short presentation on us moving to a new network with EVPN. And that part of that is to help, particularly the smaller networks, manage in times of heavy traffic, bad traffic attacks.
Yeah, as for M6 in Amsterdam, basically the same as Ben. We do not provide DDoS mitigation ourselves, but we work closely together with anti-DDoS providers. So any customer that is interested in having these solutions, we can refer them. And we also work together, we're partners with the National Scrubbing Center. That's a Dutch initiative for hosting companies, ISPs that want to have extra capacity or an additional port exclusively for the use of DDoS mitigation. They get a huge discount for that, so we actively help them in order to solve this problem. We do not offer it themselves, but we try to make it as easy as possible for them to help them to get these solutions.
Okay, thank you.
Ok. Infelizmente eu vou ter que encerrar.
We have to close. I'm so sorry. We are 15 minutes late. We do not have much time for lunch, so we have to close. Thank you so much to all of you. It was a very interesting panel. Thank you.
E já gostaria de chamar o Leonardo Melo, do CETIC, do NIC.br, que vai fazer a apresentação do TIC Provedores. Temos mais? Vão todos? O Fábio, o Marcelo. Tudo bem? Pode, pode.
Bom, boa tarde.
Good afternoon. Our talk is before lunch, but we'll try to be very brief so we don't get late with the lunch time. So we are here to present some novelty about TIC providers survey. We'd like to highlight that the production of statistics within NIC.br is being conducted since 2005, where CETIC provides updated, strict information about access and use of internet in Brazil. CETIC started producing statistics since 2005, where we have TIC homes and TIC companies, TIC households. The TICs are the ITCs, right? In Portuguese, we call them TICs, TICs. How is the access provider niche in the country? What are the main services, infrastructure? And that research is done every 3 years, and now we are disclosing results about the previous year.
A gente, então, fica à disposição de todo o setor.
So at cetic.br web page, you may get access to our researches, all of them based on international measurement standards, and we are always trying to provide that information not only to the sectors, but to the government and to NIC.br to better design public policies. Marcelo is in charge for statistics. What is the methodology behind that? And then Leonardo will make some presentations about data. They have been published for the first time, and they are at our website for everyone's access. One representative from any provider company is interviewed, and there are those who probably answered the interview. That is not possible to do that without the participation of the sector. No companies are identified. They are all confidential, and they are used so you can map the sector. I also would like to thank IBOP Intelligence. They are responsible for collecting data in the field, and our group of experts on behalf of Milton. I will now give the floor to Marcelo. who will tell us how that is done. I am the statistician. The goal is to collect characteristics of provider companies. We started from those companies who are registered and they offer services of communication and multimedia. We got the base of June 2017. We estimate a total of 6,600 internet providers all over the country. And we had divided that base in two settings. One, it has to do with those companies that should declare accesses between January and May 2017. For those companies, we had a very long, detailed questionnaire. A total of over 3,000 providers, and over 2,000 of them answered the whole questionnaire. I'd like to thank them. During that process, we have to thank to those who answered. We have resources. Many people just abandon the research. Some people, they want to do that again, and the quality of data in our case is very good, 70%, but we always try to improve that rate. So the idea is to reinforce with you providers to answer that, because they are done to help you to improve your conditions to work in this country. 3,000 providers who declared access between January and May last year. In 2011 and 2014, that was done just by a telephone interview, but this year, those who would like to answer online could do that as well. We have lots of information in our website if you feel like getting more. So I'd like to thank those responders and to thank those who were engaged. That was a research that was debated at several forums. Our population was aware of that, and that was so important to us. Who are those providers? Who are those over 3,000 providers? 3,091 to be precise. So I will approach some aspects regarding technology, and that is the scenario for regional internet in Brazil and challenges. 88% of companies, they are small companies. 39% of them have from 1 to 9 people involved. From Access report, 75% of companies, they have up to 1,000 accesses, 25% less than 100, 29 from between 300 and less than 1,000. That is a regional market of small companies at local markets. Here we have a regional distribution of providers by region. In blue, we have micro companies. In orange, small companies. And the greater population of small and micro companies are reflected here if they would choose for the simplest. That's very typical for Brazil. It's useless trying to explain to you what the simplest is. It's a taxation form. And there are some advantages or some challenges if you decide to become a company which is simplest. We asked if companies had their own website, and 90% of them said yes, we have our own website. At TIC Empresas, IATC companies, which is a survey or a research conducted with several companies from the Brazilian economy, where 55% of them have a website. And here we are talking about micro and small size companies. 23% of them said they have a website. So the website represents a qualification of those companies, which is not disseminated along other companies. 80% of them said that they have a profile or their own account, and how much those companies, they make use of that close communication to clients, especially when we see what are the most used social networks. And that is a piece of data which is parallel to other ones. We also asked providers what are their most sold speeds. 12 Mbps, 15, 18, and 16% of companies, with most of them saying that 5 is the most sold velocity. And by region, the cycle Mbps, it's in the northeast companies and the south ones with 20 and 25%, and 10 Mbps is exclusively for the southeast. We also asked about the type of technology offered to the client. Wireless access is dominant, but we have to talk about optical fibers. Optical fibers is close to customers' house, where 48% of them said that offering optical fiber, and that proportion now goes to 78%. Optical fiber per region, where we have a percentage growth of 30 points by all regions. Well, that is a growth that is pushed by small companies, and that is quite predominant, and it becomes the principal part. About autonomous ownership system, 70% of companies said that they had an autonomous system, and today 77%. Here we have a different debate. The reason why there is autonomous or there isn't autonomous services and the cost of service and so on, they are seen as the main things, the main reason why they do not have an autonomous system. So 77% of ownership, that is a high percentage, but investment costs, they still affect some companies. PTT and IX participation, 42% of providers, they said yes, they participate at a PTT. In 2014, 27% of companies, they stated to participate at some type of PTT. In 2017, we changed that question and we included IX as well. But that is a growth trend. When we ask the companies why they do not participate, the high cost to contract a transportation infrastructure affects it, and lack of availability of the service of the region are the main reasons why they do not do it. 50% of some companies in one of the regions of Brazil said that the high cost to contract a transport infrastructure is a way to prevent them to participate at PTT. Availability of IPv4, IPv6, IPv4 valid offered by 86% of all companies, IPv6 30%, and then regional distribution IPv6, which is being offered by 1/3 of the companies. And we have to check in the next slide the reason why it's so difficult to activate IPv6 and why they stopped offering that to clients, and to start planning for IPv6 transition. This is the reason why they do not want to have that. Lack of skilled people or proper tools or equipments. In the northern region, 40% of the companies said there is a lack of skilled people. That is still related to what we were saying before, maintenance of teams. And Northeast, 40% of companies, they said about lack of equipments for IPv6 activation. My last slide. Security. We asked companies if they suffered any type of steel, cables, wires, and 40% of companies said yes. 57% of companies in the Northeast said they suffer some type of robbery. And 79% said that yes, they do. We have more data than that. You may find the tables at the sites, at the website. Well, we are open for discussion. Thank you. All data have been published already. That data is being used by the government in the public policies. So I'd like to thank the group who advises that. We have MCT, KRNP representatives, and Anatel. Any questions before lunch? We have discussed about that research before this event. Number of access that was used to classify the size of the companies. That data seems to have small numbers. And after our meeting, we had a few talks with providers. And in fact, numbers are much, much bigger. So the home take message is, it's important that providers would register properly number of access to have a real vision about the size of the market, number of people that are addressed by providers. What we get at the official base of Anatel does not reflect our reality, and it depends on the community of providers to do something about that. Well, we searched that sector since 2011, and we see a great improvement. The information we got in 2011 was not so qualified as the one we have today. We can just have this type of statistics with the official registries, and that will impact how much we can go deep with that. And as Leo said, we are not even able to present 10% of what is available. So you are all invited to visit the website, and we hope we can present those results somewhere else. That's it, right? We are all hungry. Let's go. Thank you so much. See you later.
Bom, só novamente queria agradecer os nossos patrocinadores, o Google, a Abranet, a Cisco.
Once again, they are thanking all the very important sponsors of this wonderful event.
Os Equinix, o PX Technologies, Telsius e L8. Então, vamos agora uma parada para o almoço, a gente retorna às...
Please be back at 2.